Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller Podcast. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm good because we are back really as the Jack Carr podcast, the Terminalist podcast, the James Reece podcast.
Boom, baby. I guess we haven't even mentioned on the pod that you came and visited me up in Pennsylvania, and we got to meet the man himself in person.
What a fun time that was. We never met any of our authors in person
No, first
that
time.
we've talked
first
to.
time. We met David.
We met David, the Bus, Atrium Mystery Bus. Great follow on socials. He's the publicist for all the Jack Carr books, the Vince Flynn books, Brad Thor. Best in the business. You can't get better than Atria Books and their publishing team, from Emily Bessler down to David, the publicist. And it was a pleasure. They put on a great event. We met one of our patrons, Kevin B.
Yeah,
Shout out to Kevin.
B.
Got a little T-shirt from him, the Tour de Force, a
I
charity
wore it
that
yesterday.
he works with. Yeah,
Very
that's
comfortable.
it's a comfortable T-shirt.
I like
real
that
nice.
T-shirt.
And we did a little shirt exchange. So he gave us that, and we hooked him up with a thrillerpod.com shirt. So that's going to be launched on our website soon, our new store. We'll have a lot of new Thriller podcast gear. And it was
I
just
forgot
great.
we're doing video. I forgot we're doing video now. I need to start wearing that to these recording sessions. Sorry,
Yeah,
Mike.
it's my new pod shirt. Now one less decision to make every time we're clicking record. I know what I'm wearing already.
Perfect.
Yeah, it was a great weekend. I enjoyed it. We got to talk thrillers a little bit. We got to play some golf. I sadly didn't get to see your family. Would have loved to see
No.
Patrick, Mary, and the kids, but that'll come next time.
Yeah, I got you up at like 4:45 to go play golf at 6:30. I played one of the best rounds probably of my life.
Yeah.
Maybe not drinking while golfing is a good thing.
And you're a morning guy. You're a morning
I'm
guy.
a morning guy.
It took
So-
me 9 holes to wake up, though. I didn't wake up till that back 9, but you were on fire
Ooh,
the
you
whole
had
time.
a good back. You had a good back 9.
That might have been my best back 9 ever. 5 pars
Did you have
in a row.
5 pars in a row?
5
like
pars.
Legit pars too. Yeah,
Never done that. Yeah.
they were good.
Woof.
I was driving the ball. Anyways, this is not the golf podcast. This is the Jack Carr podcast, the Terminalist podcast. We are here to talk book 7. It's hard to think.
Wow.
This is book 7. Last summer we crushed through all the books, finishing up the series in anticipation for the show. We covered the show last year, so go and check out those feeds if want to just nostalgically listen to our voice. Mike and guests break down multiple episodes. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk Red Sky Mourning. Jack mentioned at the book signing we went to that number 7, and even in at the author's note at the end, he mentions that this is like dedicated to Ian Fleming, 007, James Bond. And I didn't even know. I had finished the book before we went to the book signing. But I hadn't yet read the author's note because whatever. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, man, this definitely seems like a James Bond novel. Like it's very like James Bond-esque. And lo and behold, like it comes through, like because he mentions it at the end, and like I was able to pick up on that without him telling me it, and it definitely comes through.
It's completely true. I think the author's note solidified it, but I had kind of in my subconscious hints of, I'm reading something familiar here. This character and the texture of everything. And even off the gate, it's a nod to Clancy as well. Because
20th anniversary, right?
I was going to say, it's an anniversary of Clancy's work. It's a nod to Ian Fleming and his author's note in the beginning. I guess the preface note, which we always love from Jack Carr, these essays that he gives us. It was written in GoldenEye, Jamaica, which is where Ian Fleming did his work. And it's just
30th anniversary of Hunt for Red October.
And just the way we open with the submarine plot and how the art of war is brought into a lot of the Chinese conversations, the tech specs of the subs. We always get tech specs of weapons and gear and knives. We're getting that same level of detail with subs now. This is a nod to Clancy. It's a nod to Fleming. It is overall just a very smart and classy book. It's a classy nod to these titans who Jack has leaned upon. And I'm going to add one more nod here. This might be one of the closest I've read to a Consent to Kill style tome. I really think by book 7, because Consent to Kill was Vince Flynn's book 7, I think if you include term limits. And I really feel like Jack Carr is writing a seminal work with something he does towards the end. We'll get to that in part 2 in our next podcast. Something with what happens to James, a twist in his life, and it's a nod to a lot of other people. I think there's just so many smart, classy nods to the greats, and this book solidifies Jack Carr should be talked about in those same circles.
Yeah, and he also mentions in the author note, as well as when we met him at the book signing, he named a series of the greats that truly influenced them. And even though he didn't mention Vince Flynn, he's mentioned it before, that that's sort of the modern day people that he looks up to. But going back to, the Robert Ludlums, the Ian Flemings, the Tom Clancy's, and many more that he lists, it definitely shines through. I think the writing in this one is really good. We're going to get into, we've read the book completely. We're recording both pods, part 1 and part 2, back to back. Sometimes we do it opposite, where we record halfway. Some of our patrons have mentioned that they prefer that. Others haven't waged any sort of opinion. But I'm going to say that I think it's actually better that we are recording now after reading the entire novel, because this book, while I have high praise for it, the first half is just, it's different, and it's building up towards this thing that maybe I would have been a little bit more down on it than I ultimately wanted to be, because, you need that first half in order to justify the second half.
Sure.
But in the moment, I would have been upset because, we do have some cool action scenes we're going to get into in the first half, but, it's a lot of like contemplation with Reece himself. The theme of this book is thinking about, I'm thinking about to not terminalist, but transfer of power, where Mitch is thinking about, oh, I need to get out. We're constantly we're constantly in James's head, where he's like, I'm the reason that Lauren and Lucy were killed. I'm the reason that, Katie and Rafe and the Hastings have been put on this thing. And we're going to get into where Katie actually gets shot, and he's worried that she might die, and it's his fault because of this. So while in the moment I was like sort of down halfway through, I came way back around at the very end.
Yeah.
And I have a little bit more retrospective and appreciation for that first half.
I can't agree more. This book was a true roller coaster. It had highs and lows, peaks and troughs. When we open with the submarine plot, that extended first chapter,
It's an hour on audiobook.
Yeah,
an hour.
It's got to be at least 30, maybe 40, 50 pages of print. And it's like kicking off this nuclear war. It's involving data transfers, bombing Hawaii. It's nods to like Pearl Harbor. I'm wondering, what this submarine commander's doing. Is he going rogue? Is he taking orders? It's almost going to be like a World War III book, which it ends up being, and it's just so perfectly done. I'm riding a high. Then we see Vic, and I really liked the introduction where he comes back and we see him on the dock and Reece is flying with Liz. I thought that was a great chapter. And for a little while, the book kind of just hummed along.
It slows down.
It slows down. And some of the conversations, I don't know where they're headed. It's almost like, are we getting too many loose ends? Because we're meeting some more of the Chinese people, that Ba Jin, that minister who's working for state security and meeting with the prime minister. We're introduced to Harding, this politician where I'm kind of curious about, but I don't know her angle just yet. I know she wants to beat Olson and she's going to run for president, and she has California in her pocket, which is a leg up. We're just meeting a lot of different people, and I don't exactly know where they're going to go with it all. And then, wow, that second half. Guys, part 2 of this recording, stick around for it, because at the end of the first half, was I going to put this on my top best books in the series? It's probably maybe bottom of the pack, middle bottom of the pack somewhere. You read the second half of this book and how smart the plot develops and how everything checks out and how the action rises. Guys, listen to the end of part 2, because this book is going to move up the ranks. And from our social media contest, we asked you what your favorite top 3 Jack Carr books are in the series. Chris, Can we give away those 2 copies we have right now before we really get into everything?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's do it. I'm eager to talk about this.
We had a lot of responses. So thank you guys, whether it's on Twitter, X, Instagram, or the Facebook group. Probably about 70 replies and comments, maybe even a little more, of your favorite books. You know, a lot of people had the OGs, and I'm in that camp. Terminalist, True Believer, Savage Son, their top 3 was just the original guys. Couple people surprised me. The Devil's Hand. It got a significant number of 3 spots.
No way.
It did. I was surprised. The Devil's Hand got a couple of 3 spots. People liked it. Most lists did have Terminalist somewhere in the 1 or the 2 spot. They liked the original. And then everyone's like 3rd spot or somewhere on the list alternated between Devil's Hand, In the Blood. Not as many In the Bloods, I would say. And not as many Only the Dead. I would say it surprised me on a few, but we had a big mix. Anyway, I'm going to go to Twitter. I'm going to randomly scroll through my notifications and then without looking, put my thumb on one and we'll see who is the winner. So let me get notifications open. All right, here we go. Scroll and thumb. Marcus Carter. Marcus at ML Carter 34. He had the Terminalist, Savage Son, and the Devil's Hand. I told you.
No way.
The Devil's Hand snuck into that 3rd spot. Marcus looks like Kansas City. I see in his profile. He's got some Chiefs stuff. He's got the Kansas City logo, the Royals. Marcus Carter from Kansas City. We will be reaching out to you. You'll get a choice of the Devil's Hand or In the Blood, a signed copy coming your way. At the end of this pod, we'll pick one more from, let's say, Facebook this time. We'll pick a Facebook commenter and we'll give away there. So, Marcus, you get choice of In the Blood or the Devil's Hand. One of them is a shot-through version, that very rare shot-through version.
Shot-through.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Marcus will pick that, and then at the end of this pod, we'll give away the other one.
Sounds good.
All right, where do you want to start with this one? I mean, it's got a great Goodreads score. Why don't you give us a little plot summary and the scores this one got?
Yeah, I mean, it's currently got a 4.6, 4.7 on Goodreads and Amazon, respectively. You know, I think it's justified. That might come down a little bit with more the more ratings you get, but for right now, the introductory reviewers are really liking it. So what Amazon says is, with the walls closing in, Navy SEAL sniper James Reece is on a race to dismantle a conspiracy that has forced America to her knees. In the latest high-octane page-turner that seems ripped from the headlines from the hottest author on the thriller scene today. The hottest author on the thriller scene today.
I'd agree.
From the Real Book Spy. New York Times bestseller, Jack Carr. So it goes, you think you know James Reece? Think again. A storm is on the horizon. America's days are numbered. A Chinese submarine has gone rogue and is navigating towards the continental United States, putting its nuclear missiles within striking distance of the West Coast. A rising Silicon Valley tech mogul with an unknown allegiances is at the forefront of a revolution in quantum computing and artificial intelligence. A politician controlled by a foreign power is a breath away from the Oval Office. 3 seemingly disconnected events are on a collision course to ignite a power grab unlike anything the world has ever seen. The country's only hope is a quantum computer that has gone dark. Retreating to the deepest levels of the internet, learning at a rate inconceivable at her inception, but during her time in hiding, she has done more than learn. She has become a weapon. She is now positioned to act as either the country's greatest savior or its worst enemy. She is known as Alice, and her connection to the outside world is to a former Navy SEAL sniper named James Reece, who has left the violence of his past life behind. Sure he has. Will there be blood? Count on it. So, I mean, This simply encapsulates everything, right?
It lives up to that, for sure.
We start out with, like we mentioned, this extended prologue on the submarine. We're unsure what's going on. He gets this note to attack with a non-nuclear missile, and we realize that this is all a plot corresponding with the other 2, events. You have the tech mogul, the guy from Alba Industries, who has made this rival to Alice, which is called Napoleon, as well as this politician in the Hardings, who she's poised to come control. It looks like, because we know that the current president Olson is stepping down, not running again, and this the Hardings have prime position to win the election, and we find out that she's taken this deal with China, that China gives her the goods, essentially this a lot of information, access to unfettered information, texts, things to use as weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Then she will be a major player for them when she gets into, essentially saying, like, if you attack Taiwan, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
There's going to be no repercussions.
She'll
We're
let it
essentially
happen.
she's going to let it happen, avoiding like a nuclear conflict. And we find out that this attack on the submarine, where it actually doesn't happen. He launches it, but it's able to be intercepted. Pretty cool. All that stuff is pretty cool, where they're able to get this other submarine close enough to attack it. China actually even you can tell this is all ploy, because China calls and tells them, like, oh, we've lost contact with this person.
Yeah.
So all of this is a means to trigger an event that causes all of our data that is stored, military data that is stored on Hawaii, to be transferred to Utah. My first question is, why don't we just keep it in Utah?
You're thinking too hard, Chris. I was about to say, everything checks out. Like everything you're explaining, that line, 3 seemingly disconnected events are on a collision course to ignite a power grab unlike anything the world has ever seen. It all checked out. From a seedy politician buying hook, line, and sinker this quid pro quo that the Chinese will give her political data she can use to win, and the quid pro quo, she won't attack them if they invade Taiwan. She'll stand down. Like, okay, that I can kind of buy from a corrupted California tech mogul politician. I could buy this Chinese commander willing to launch it and giving this talk to his troops on the boat, right? When the commander Liu Zhen gives his talk to the troops saying, we are starting World War III. We are a go. We were given orders to launch. I'm like, oh shit. And then when the Chinese president calls President Olson, and at the end they're like, do you think she bought it? Do you think she bought the lie that this Chinese commander went rogue and we didn't really, give him these orders to do this? And I thought the president bought it. I thought she was like, oh crap, there's a random sub we have to shoot down. It has nothing to do with the Chinese government. So all that checked out. And then you asked the big question, the data transfer. A bit of a stretch. I think the whole data interception piece, I see where Jack's going, and it's ripe for AI to kind of get involved and hijack that. The data storage talk was kind of cool about terabytes and quantum bytes and how much data is actually being stored on these massive servers and how it's backed up. And I think it's posing really good questions. Is it a weak link in terms of the plotting? Maybe. And maybe it sets up, though, like the fact that the other side, this Elba Industries, invented their Napoleon. Data is going to be one of the places, and who can control and manipulate data, where I think AI is super important. And when we have AI versus AI, what if one's smart enough? It's like, the whole, that immovable, like, what can an all-powerful God do if there's an all-powerful boulder that can't be moved? An immovable object, but an all-powerful force. It's kind of like, what if one AI says this data can't be encrypted? It's 100% locked down. And then another AI says, I can decrypt anything. That battle of wills between the two technologies, which one's better?
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty good question to be asking. Alice
It
versus
is.
Napoleon is going to be something really incredible. Elba Industries, we get a little bit more backstory on where they came from and who this guy in charge of it is, this Hart character. So, yeah, I think there are some plot holes, some loopholes that technically I don't really want filled in anymore, because we might be coming up with some really bizarre ways to write it off and explain it away. But the data transfer does just enough to keep me interested and say, wait, who, where, how, what's Alice going to have to do with this? And the fact that I'm distracted by the submarine plot, which is just phenomenal, kind of helps me overlook that. So I think the submarine plot just carries the story here, carries the day. And then when we cut to Harding meeting with a Chinese representative in Napa, at wine country. It's like we got the bad politician on the inside. We've got the Chinese influencing our political system. And we've got the entire Pacific Fleet on a war footing. This is insane. So I'm in. Even if there are some loopholes.
Yeah, I guess he does do a good job of mentioning like why we keep stuff in Hawaii, and so, but there needs to be contingency plans, so because of like just pure space and cooling and energy and that kind of stuff. So
Right.
he does enough to like make me buy in and believe it, but I'm just like, it's literally all coming down to like, if we didn't transfer that data, then this. But I guess they know that this is what is actually going to happen, so that's why they go this route.
The data is also the war plans. I mean, they're going to intercept all of our war plans, all of our communication
for the Pacific
controls
Fleet.
for the Pacific Fleet. So it's like it's affecting the election with political data based on voters and internet and social media, but it's also data based on our military communications and capabilities. So I think that's another interesting wrinkle there. The data thing is kind of a red herring in some ways. It's important to the plot, but we're going to talk about next episode on part 2. There's an even more important plot. The Chinese submarines, the data transfer, really isn't even the end goal. And I love that when that comes up, that there is another wrinkle based on an interrogation scene that China is really after. And that's when I'm like, oh my God, Taiwan was kind of a distraction. The presidential election was kind of a distraction. There's another layer here. And we're not going to get into it yet, but when that layer comes out based on that interrogation scene, whoa, the book changes all of a sudden.
Yeah, I guess we should say we're going to cover part 1, the call, and most of part 2, the threshold, sort of right up until there's a big turning event.
Yes.
And if anyone is listening to this while they're reading, we're going to try our best to steer clear of, spoiling that turn as well as the ending. But it's crazy that this turn doesn't happen until 2/3 into the novel, 3/4 into the novel.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we kick things off after the prologue. We meet Reece. This was the chapter that we had covered in our run up. This was released as the first chapter during promo. Nice little flying lesson, and then Vic. There's Vic on the thing. He needs to. He got recalled essentially, and we meet Alice again. She's brought back into the picture. That VR headset. She will only talk to James, and she fills him in on all this thing. This overmatch idea. This idea that eventually our fleet will become autonomous, making decisions as it goes along. And I want to bring up also the preface. Before Jack goes into this whole sort of, not diatribe, but like he lays out this idea, bringing up both Michael Crichton and Mary Shelley, obviously for Jurassic Park and for Frankenstein,
Yeah.
and sort of as a warning for artificial intelligence, and like, obviously the creator becoming the creator becoming like mastered by its creation.
Yeah.
Where you have dinosaurs and Frankenstein in those two cases. He also does this interesting backstory of like the Department of Defense and how it used to be called the Department of War, and how it's still pretty much the Department of War. They don't really do much defense. And, it's just this machine that keeps feeding itself, needing, budgets and defense contracts and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
So I really enjoyed that preface. And then I think it does a good job of setting up this whole, bringing in Alice, bringing in this idea of our Pacific Fleet is potentially going to be controlled. We even get that one chapter where we see that we actually have one of these. Well, in the book, he mentions at the end, he's not sure if we already have we have the prototype to this ultra new, what is it, the Ohio class submarines that are fully autonomously controlled and essentially like spaceships in the sea. But it got me really intrigued, and I like this relationship between Alice and James. It definitely sets up this like, he's the James Bond character. He's the only one who can save the world. He's got to be called in for everything. And then we get like these hard exchanges between him and Jonathan and Rafe.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of introspection, thinking about Rafe says, don't do it. Don't get back into it. You're out. They locked you up. They betrayed you. They killed your family. Like, why are you going to do that? You owe them nothing. Jonathan says the same thing, calling back to, his time in the service and how he was let down and how, he even brings up this guy he met, a former soldier that he operated with. He happens to see him in Malta at a bar, and they just look at each other, don't talk, and it shows you your people are capable of getting past these things, and you can do that too here on this ranch with us as a family. And I really think that James is contemplating not doing it until we get the next events.
Yeah. It's a good conversation with Jonathan. It's powerful. He gives him the typewriter and he starts saying, lay down some roots. He's like, Caroline and I had to make choices, and he didn't necessarily want to hole up in Montana and stay there, but he said he did it for his wife. He did it for his family. Caroline loved that lifestyle. And that trumped. That was the most important thing to him at that time. It wasn't his revenge quest. It wasn't his warrior skills. It wasn't him trying to connect with his Rhodesian past or even go visit his uncle, or his brother in Africa still. It was about making that hard break, putting down roots, and if Caroline would be happy riding her horses on the Coomba Ranch in the valley, then that's where they were going to stay. It was like Jonathan saying, there is a way to leave the past behind. And the fact that we're here in Montana together is a testament to the fact that I left the past behind.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that haunting story about the guy on Malta. It's like the head nod was enough. He knew he was a Cella scout. He heard the Rhodesian accent, and all you needed was the head nod. And, that acknowledged the past while it also moved on. And that guy's just living his life there. The Hastings are living their life in Montana. And I think Jonathan is trying to tell Reece, you could have this too. They talk about a baby a little bit, talk about future grandkids and whatnot, and how the Hastings would be happy to consider Reece and Katie's children as grandchildren. And it's a good conversation. It's a good conversation. But what's amazing about the stuff in Montana is I love how Red Sky Mourning is dealt with right off the bat, in the sense of a mourning. Reece has this kind of routine of going out on the docks, leaving Katie in bed. He doesn't think she wakes up, even though she's kind of stirring. She even watches him for a little bit. But he's out on that dock clearing his mind. He's got his coffee and that Red Sky Mourning. Jack even says in the author's note, he says, on those Red Sky Mournings, I'm reminded of this secret clandestine world, the world of the shadows that's operating, that doesn't stop, and is the reason we're kept safe. And that Red Sky Mourning for Jack is a reminder of his past life. He says his short time in the, intelligence collecting side of things and his short time in the special forces. And now James is watching that same Red Sky Mourning, having the same questions of what's next for me. Also, really enjoy the Alice stuff. You mentioned how Alice is now becoming basically this overmatch, where she may be the one who can autonomously control our entire defense system. And that is a nod to Shelley and Jurassic Park, Michael Crichton and everyone, because we're now doing that. We have the AI. We're at the tipping point of the stories of the 20th century that were warnings are now present and omnipresent in society. We are on the tipping point of getting that technology. Here be monsters. He uses the line, here be monsters. And the monsters are within us. And now we've created something where the monsters within us are expressed as decision makers, autonomous decision makers outside of us, technological beings that have the same drive to be the monsters that humanity has inside. And that is captured when Alice reveals she, to become more human, needs to take on an individuality. In the sense of AI is scary because of the collective. It can process at ridiculous quantum computing rates all of the data in the known universe. Just if you could literally download into your brain every bit, every megabyte, every terabyte, every whatever, and have a brain that can understand, interpret, categorize, and analyze all of that data instantaneously, that's what Alice can do. But the even scarier part is that Alice can do that as a human. And the reason she could do that is because of James. She decided to mimic his thought processes, to mimic his decision making, to mimic his humor, even to have the voice of his wife. Even she even says, "I'm not going to reveal to you my full identity as your wife." I think it might scare him to see
Yeah.
Lauren so clearly. But Alice is at the point where she can be Reece. She literally can mimic one-to-one Reece's thought patterns, decision making. And what do we know from Reece? Vengeance. It's about vengeance. The terrible things he did in the first book and second book and even third book, and then honestly his whole life, is now training an AI to do that. And that AI has unlimited knowledge of the entire internet and every basically piece of data in the world. That's scary. Alice now has the collective data and the individual thought processes of a single solitary human. Because that's always the X factor with technology is, well, it can know everything, but can it really act like a human? Well, Alice has decided to take one individual human and train herself to be that person. This is the closest to human I think we can get.
Yeah, the closest to like an all powerful human you could get.
Right.
And I guess that's the warning is like what individual does that AI decide to emulate? You know, does it decide to emulate someone who is good? Does it decide to emulate someone who is bad? You know, a Hitler, some sort of dictator, a Mother Teresa,
Yeah.
or even a James Reece, someone
Yeah.
who is imperfect, right?
Woof.
And I think, you know, we even get a scene where an opposing AI is able to tap into an encrypted system of I have a Tesla. This was a little bit creepy for me.
Yeah.
Override its system and cause, you know, this journalist to crash and die. And, you know, so that's showing what an alternative AI can do. And we know that Alice is stronger than this AI, and so she can do much, much more than this. So it is creepy. It is scary. I understand why it gets people upset, you know, which is why we need to constantly be thinking about safeguards, constantly thinking about, you know, checkpoints. You know, I don't know. Like, I'm not the best person to talk about like whether or not we're going to essentially make our own Skynet like in the future where you know, it's like the Terminator come to life, but it feels like we're rushing towards that for the sake of, you know, advancement, the sake of progress. So yeah, it's this book. It's definitely prescient, and it's definitely it raises some fears, and it makes you like creepy and eerie sometimes. You know.
Isn't this the Alice we wanted, though? Remember when Alice was dropped for a book and like not really brought up after she was
Yeah,
created?
no, but this is what I wanted, and I'm glad we
Yes.
got it.
This
Yeah.
is the Alice we wanted. Last book, it's like Alice went dark for the reasons we know, and it let it become a book about James's father, which I think was
Yeah.
needed. The space to make that, you know, the James, the Tom Reese story. But now, right when the fans wanted Alice, she is back in full force, and this is the Alice I wanted. This is the questions I wanted to be grappled with, and I think it was just like last book was smart to bring in Tom Reese and the Poe storyline. This book is smart to bring back Alice and an AI versus AI storyline. I think it's a great choice.
Yeah.
We've been beating around the bush though, Chris. The big events of the first half of this book, the massive elephant in the room is Katie gets shot. Dude, she's
Yeah,
on her
that
deathbed.
it's like right after we meet Alice that we get this huge attack at the ranch.
Yeah.
We have some, you know, we couldn't keep the action out like that long. We know that Jack wants to get back to the action. Some mad tactical hand to hand combat. He finds, you know, he's like, oh, I know one item that I can find in this down plane, and it's of course his
It's the
tomahawk
tomahawk.
that he's able to use with great ease. You know, that was pretty sick. How he's able to clear. There's the sniper play. You have Rafe and Jonathan coming
Oh,
back in to
on
save the
Overwatch.
day.
Yeah.
All that is cool, and then you're left with like this emotional, you know, weight and drop. The fact that, oh shit, is Katie gonna die? You know, they're able to get her medevaced out, but she has to go to Billings. You know, and it's funny because I've been to, so essentially he's right outside of Glacier National Park because they say he goes to Whitefish a lot,
Whitefish,
which
yeah.
is on the one side of Glacier National Park. So it's funny. I was there last summer in and around Glacier, but we drove through Billings, and that's a drive. So obviously, super concerned about her. You're left like, I'm wondering, like, is he going to do it again? Like, is he going to kill his love interest? You kind of had the feeling like, no, he couldn't. He couldn't do it. Like, he did that in the first book. You can't do that again. I had a feeling that she was going to live, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah. It's kind of like in the Mitrap series how we're like, you can't just kill Claudia, because we already did that with Anna. Consent to kill happened.
Yeah.
We can't just kind of let that all happen again. Some people want that to happen, but I think you have to come up with more creative ways to do it. And so while reading this chapter, my God, I'm all in. And I think this is like 4 or 5 chapters.
Yeah.
Some of our earlier chapters were really long, the exposition ones and the subplot. These chapters are like a page and a half. They're just flying. They're short. Exactly. It really breaks up this action scene into like stages. That's boom, 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 one after the other. And when we get to Reece in the room with the sniper shooting at him while he has to do first aid and he has to give medical attention to Katie, I think he's even seeing apparitions of Lauren and Lucy.
Yeah, he is.
They're appearing to him in this fight. That really reminded me of the first time he saw these apparitions. I think it's after Aaliyah's plane goes down and he goes to Israel and he's on the kibbutz and he's having to fight and run through these trees and these fields and they're talking to him. They're doing the same here. But this time he's like, is this all my fault? Is it my fault that we're at this ranch, that the Hastings are compromised, that Katie's life is compromised? And he's truly considering, would things be better without me here?
Mm-hmm.
Is Katie better off with me gone from her life? Are the Hastings better off with me gone from their ranch? And he's going to have to grapple with those. And by the ending, not a big spoiler, we'll give this in part 2, there's a very creative way he kind of gets out of that dilemma. And Alice helps him get out of that dilemma. So great seeds being laid down here. Your edge of your seat when she gets hit. I'm really thinking, are we reliving the Terminalist? I was like, are we back to square one? And that was just, like I said, a roller coaster. It was an absolute roller coaster of a journey. And then I love how Liz and Rafe are like sentinels in the hospital, giving him the space he needs, but also reminding him like, Reece, you got to take a shower. Reece, we have to go eat.
Yeah. And I enjoyed those chapters because they're kind of like this pause. Again, like there's a lot of like intense action and then like like you said, peaks and valleys. Like, we go up in a peak with the beginning and like the submarine and like figuring out the plot, and then we go down with like, just meeting Reece and like, the sort of the build up again. And then we get this attack, and then we have like the come down from the attack to like, Katie's recovery and all this stuff. And then even following that with James deciding that, all right, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Not because Vic asked me to, but because they forced my hand and I'm going to get my revenge. I'm going to get my retribution again. And, he goes now he has to meet with that interesting tech guy who, what is his name? Lawrence Miles.
Yep.
At that cool house in Sausalito, goes to San Francisco at the safe house. We get another whole chapter exposition from Andy Danreb. Jack even mentions, like, remember last year when you gave me an entire, sort of a nod to his own, what he likes to put as plot devices.
Yeah.
We, instead of, last year was finance, this year is all about, this year's
data.
It was all about data. Yeah. And like, that kind of stuff. Quantum computing. Yeah.
He's like, let's just not have another hour-long conversation about finances that are way over my head. I was like, that was a good nod. But then they do it anyway. Then they go on and have that conversation.
I know. And then finally to accepting, the whole conceit now is that China wants to meet face to face with Reece, realizing that their first plan of attack failed. So now let's offer him sanctuary, because I'm sure James Reece is going to accept that offer.
Would you agree with me? This is about the point of the book where things got suspect.
A little bit. This is where I'm talking that I was losing my interest a little bit.
A little bit. This was probably that valley on the roller coaster where I'm just wondering, one, am I going to buy into Macau that Reece has to fly and be invited by the Chinese government, and something with like this Academy of Engineers. No doubt that's how they do it. They'd use some cover story, some bunk university program that he's invited to or accepted into. But then you actually meet on the top level of a casino with a high up official advisor kind of to the
I mean, that stuff was
president.
cool though.
It was cool. It was really cool. And it was high stakes once we got there. But the decision to accept the way the CIA and Vic is pushing, like, we need you to go over there and really figure out what's happening. And Reece is like, maybe I leave my life behind and actually accept their plan to settle down in China. When I heard that China, there was one conversation where they were like, if we can't kill James Reece, let's invite him here. I'm like, what? Like, excuse me? Like, let's give him sanctuary. He must hate his country because he was in solitary confinement for 3 months. Yeah, I don't know if that's how it works. Just because your government wrongly accused you of something and you were locked up, that all of a sudden you want to move to China. Like, it just something about it didn't compute for me.
Yeah.
But maybe him talking to Miles, this was another thing of like, I don't think he ever thought I'm going to accept their invitation to live in China and basically hide out and bring Katie over and be safe. I thought that was bogus. I don't even know why that was said. But I think when he talked to Miles, and it was kind of cool, you're right, San Francisco Bay and the harbor, this boating culture, the two of them can really connect. He was like another Poe. I mean, I don't know if that's a device I like because we never hear or see from him again. We just kind of needed him to establish a connection to Hart and Elba Industries. Right. I guess we should get into the Elba Industries of it all, is that Miles developed this technology, basically what would become quantum computing, data collection, analytics. And
the ability to cool and
exactly
be able to process data really fast.
Process the data.
And
yeah, exactly. And that would become Oracle, very successful companies like Oracle and others that are huge players in the space. And there was always this guy Hart, he was at odds with, and Hart was kind of more of a loner. He was kind of rejected. His tech wasn't as good. He had to steal the secrets to build up his company. Yet he always had this Napoleon complex of feeling he deserved more, little man syndrome, that he deserved to be the big players. He was given the short stick, and it was no fault of his own, his intelligence, his abilities, that he was basically the loser in this entrepreneurial activity of data collection. And his company kind of failed. Well, what's his trump card? Get in bed with the Chinese. And if the Chinese are offering you that validation, if they're going to accept the little man syndrome and make you feel like big man, Miles suspects that this Hart character is in bed with the Chinese and using his technology and his secrets, and now for nefarious causes. Between that and the information Andy Danreb gives, and this is all Andy Danreb's theories, maybe I can understand Reece going to China. More of a kind of, let me see what's going on here. Let me kind of collect data, kind of like an intelligence gathering. Less of, I might actually accept their offer for sanctuary. I thought that was bogus.
Yeah, and honestly, I thought it would have been just better to say, like, let's offer him this to get him over here to do what Jin ends up doing in terms of the interrogation. Like,
and then just interrogate him right there. Like, just trick him.
Right. Instead of knowing that it's all a ruse, no matter what, instead of saying, we're going to offer him this carrot, and if he doesn't take it, then we're going to give him the stick. And as opposed, I would have believed it a lot more if they were just like, this is how we're going to kill him. We're going to get him, bring him over here, say we're going to offer him this, but in actuality, and then he's sort of doing the same thing. We're like,
yeah,
they're idiots to think that I would do this, but I'm going to go over there to collect. It's very much to me. This was like a very big nod to James Bond, like this idea that I got to go talk to essentially the arch villain, have the sit down at a dinner table or sit down at the poker table,
Casino Royale, Baccarat table, the Baccarat game. Did you hear Jack said he cut the scene? It was a little too on the nose. He wrote a whole Baccarat scene of James playing at the gambling table.
And essentially just said, in the end, he ends up skipping it, right? He's like, nah, I'm good. But a little fine tuning there would have completely changed my like dip in buy-in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I also didn't like how after the conversation goes south, Reece is making a lot of jokes, and Jack said that's another thing he cut. He was almost being too much of a smartass at the meeting there with the Chinese official.
Oh yeah, there's like 5 or 7 quips, and
Yeah.
Jack said that he had like 10 or 20 quips.
Yeah.
Like,
He cut a few, but definitely left the best ones, which was true. He's like, oh, it tastes like chicken with this fancy dinner, whatever it was served. But yeah, good conversation. The second James basically says, I'll sleep on the decision, and they know he's not serious about accepting their deal, the Chinese guy just turns to his people and like, all right, let's kill him. I'm like,
yeah,
that
exactly.
honestly
There
could
was
have just
no.
happened. They could have just captured him right on the plane, and I would have been like, yeah, that makes more sense. And then the whole Philippines thing, like, yes, it's a cool action scene in that hotel. A little cookie cutter in the sense of dudes are after James Reece. Guess what he does? Kills them all. Guess what else he does? Use improvised weapons to kill them all. Guess what else he does? Has Alice in his ear telling him what to do. I was like,
That
all
was
right,
pretty cool, though.
that was pretty cool. And when he loses the earpiece and he desperately needs
Mhm.
to go find, his thing, I was like, okay, this is fine. I don't know if we would have gotten to this point. And then one other little negative, he's just like, Alice, let me get on a plane out of here. And then Alice gets him to the airport and he's like, I can't believe they let me leave. And he's just like, oh, I'm on a plane now. They let me leave. But then they take him down in the Philippines anyway. Like, why let him leave if you're just going to intercept the plane and take it down? You just put a hood over his head, put him in a black site, take him to the Philippines if you want, wherever you're going to interrogate him with this Dr. Guerrero. Just do that right off the bat. We didn't need a lot of this interplay of, will he accept our sanctuary here? I don't know if he's going to accept it. If he doesn't, we'll kill him. Kill him anyway. A little armchair quarterbacking there. My bad.
No, it very much is. And it's like,
it gets rocky. It just gets rocky and silly.
I think this is like the hardest part. But then as soon as we get to the interrogation scene and then the flip of the interrogation scene,
we're back on track with that. Man. We are back.
From that point on,
we're back.
I'm locked in. I'm sold. But yeah, it's from after the attack, essentially him leaving Katie in the hospital to being taken in the Philippines. It's like that part of the book has some cool stuff, The Casino Manila stuff was interesting. The conversation in the restaurant, cool. The description of the setting, like all that stuff was good. And you mentioned even like the action scene where he's in his hotel. But why wouldn't, if he has Alice, why can't she put him on a different plane? Like say he's, she can control the computers. That's what I didn't understand. Like, they watch him go onto the plane, but can't she just put like a different, like an image of him going onto one plane and then he gets on a different plane? Like there's a lot you could do with this superior AI. You know what I mean?
Maybe or one thing we're going to say, maybe I wanted more of, was Napoleon versus Alice. This could have been a prime chance to see Napoleon in action. And maybe Alice best Napoleon, because
I wasn't sure
anyway
when we were going to talk about this, but that's the one thing I really wanted was some more Napoleon AI versus AI. Have you seen the new Mission Impossible?
No, I haven't. Does that
so
come up?
It's essentially a movie all about AI and how like essentially this could go bad. And there's this one particular scene. I'm not too much of a spoiler, but when he's going through the airport and trying to find somebody, and essentially the AI has put that face on a different person, and so when he actually finds them in the airport, he's like, wait, you're not the person I'm looking for. And then they quickly change to another person and another person. Like, you could have done that. Like that. Obviously, this movie's been out for a year. I don't know. Maybe he didn't want to copy it too much,
This was the part of the book that needed that level of cleaning up, though. A little more thinking through. Like, it's tough to say. I think this section that you described knocks down a point on plot and knocks down half a point on buy-in. Half a point to a full point of buy-in, I think, right here. Which is unfortunate because the opening we loved. And Jesus, once we finish this interrogation scene, everything from there on out is one of my favorite, most consistent, thrilling action scenes. That's like over 100 plus pages to finish a book. Some of the best writing I've seen out of Jack. So big things are coming on part 2. How about we end with the interrogation here? Pick up with the interrogation scenes. You all know what we're talking about. You read Red Sky Mourning. You wouldn't be here without it. If you haven't reached the interrogation scene, stop right now. Do not listen to part 2. But once you get through this book, you'll know exactly what we're talking about when we say Dr. Guerrero and the interrogation scenes.
It's funny because some of our our patrons had read faster than we could listen to the audiobook, even though I feel like I burned through it. But yes, Dawn can read really fast.
Yeah.
She's like, oh my God, is Jack Carr a sick puppy? Wait till you guys get to chapter 39 or whatever it was. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And then other people were chiming in like, oh yeah, that interrogation scene. And once I got to it, oh yeah. So again, we're gonna pause here, come back. Hope you enjoyed our discussion about part 1, and we'll be back to talk part 2 next time.
Love it.
Before that, we need to thank our patrons, including our Deputy Director, Sherry F., our Special Operator, Jason C., our Special Agents, Ben, Daryl, Kevin. Big shout to Kevin for those t-shirts again.
Yes.
George, Matt, Dawn, Peggy, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review to all 3 seasons of No Limits on Apple and Spotify. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram. We're very active on the Instagram now that Mike has taken over, at Thriller Podcast handle. And as always, just let Alice be Alice.
Chris, little postscript here. We forgot to do our second giveaway. Our In the Blood.
Oh, yes. And
Devil's Hand giveaway. Yeah, you get to choose between Devil's Hand and In the Blood. Marcus will pick his book, and then the other one will go to, I said Facebook, right? All right. And I'm going to go with the Facebook group. I posted in a lot of different groups, including the Terminalist fans, unofficial Jack Carr fan page. We're going to go with our very own No Limits, the Thriller Podcast group. So our 750 members in that group. I'm glad to see that. Let's get that number up. One of you is going to win who commented on our post. Here it is. The post reached 200 different people. And we've got a few options. Again, I'm just going to scroll up and down the comments and then put my finger on one of them. So scrolling up, scrolling down. Click. Nick Bruno. You want to hear Nick's?
What if you had picked the same person? That would have been funny.
Yeah, because I think Marcus is on multiple channels with us. But here's Nick B. Congrats. He's got Savage Son, Terminalist, True Believer. I told you, man, the original 3 again. People love it.
That's my top 3. Savage Son, True Believer, Terminalist.
However, he says, Red Sky Mourning may be the best book with how it was written, even though it's not my personal favorite. The style of writing to honor Clancy nods to Bond, action, inner battle, etc., and it was unmatchable. I'll agree. I'm a sucker for the original 3, but Red Sky Mourning is making a push to crack into that top list because it's a classy, smart nod to some greats and showing Jack Carr can be one of those greats as well.
Only the Dead, though. All right, we got to talk about this in part 2.
We put Only the Dead really high. Were we prisoners of the moment?
I put Only the Dead as 2.
You and Tyler. Remember, we had Tyler Booher
He
on.
put Only Dead. You guys both put Only Dead as 3.
Yeah, we all had it in the top 3. You went a little higher. I think he still really likes that one, but Red Sky Mourning shows us, like, maybe we're prisoners of the moment then, because I think this book is objectively better. Damn, the Tom Reece stuff was great, though. Tom Reece and Poe.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was good.
It's getting tough.
Big announcement if you stuck around this long. Thanks to our patron, Kevin B., we have another signed Jack Carr giveaway coming in part 2. So there is still an opportunity to win. And this time, you might get your hands on Red Sky Mourning.
Boom, baby.